So this is kind of a combination of input from the data work group and then working with the chairs how this proposal came about. We've been going back and forth as to what to do with a nutrient loading assessment, and so to get the ball rolling, we've worked with Yakima County to develop the scope of work, and what the scope of work would do would be bringing together some of the proposals that were made earlier by RCIM group. This would be a cooperative project that would be done between WSDA and Yakima County with heavy input from the other agencies around the table, making it more of a local project. It's a 6-part project, the first of which is the development of a database that would include the RCIM data, parcel data from the county, our cropping data layer, other databases that we have, going through, and then Yakima County would be working on the RCIM loading quantification. WSDA would be working with the irrigated agriculture loading quantification, working with the capital group for the livestock quantification, doing a nitrate loading comparison, and then finally with the development of a draft report and then final report that would come back to GWMA. We've gone through and looked at our budget. I think it's a pretty accurate estimate. I think we've gone down to from something like 200,000 to about 57,000 now, and that's where we are. And there's some questions about scalability. Some of this depends on how much participation we would get from grower surveys. If we did not get what we considered a substantial amount of grower surveys, there is a fallback position where we would take the results that we would have, probably working with the crop consultants, trying to exact as accurate loading numbers as possible. There would be we would have to rely on book values a little bit more than we would. Probably use, to some extent, as a starting basis, some of the numbers that EPA has come up with. So we can do the project at any level. One would be more accurate than the other, but certainly if we had issues with data participation from growers, we could scale the project back and go forth with it.
Questions? Jean?
Can you tell me why biosolids and composting facilities are included under RCIM?
Those biosolids and composting facilities are municipal facilities. The activities that occur on those sites are deemed municipal. They're not part of irrigated ag or livestock. That's just the classification. It doesn't mean that they're not going to get considered in here. They just get considered under the RCIM.
So when biosolids are applied to the fields, how does that assessment figure into it?
Biosolids are municipal waste, and there are a lot more regulations that deal with that, and really that's more of a public works municipal type issue. Again, they would be factored into the overall loading, but they would be in the RCIM category.
And the plan wasn't very clear on how you're going to evaluate composting facilities, especially since it's being done under RCIM.
No, we haven't really looked at how we would deal with that. We were not too interested in the operations of those facilities, just the input and output of that. That's a good comment. That's one that we consider as we go through and finalize this. So.
Two more questions. You have manure and chemical fertilizers evaluated together. They're absorbed differently by the soil.
Yes, there is in this nitrogen loading comparison, there is a provision in there to take a look at the differences of the contribution of synthetic fertilizer and the contribution of manure fertilizer. it's in the proposal. It isn't a real detailed discussion, but there is that provision in there to look at both of those sources separately and try to tease them out.
If I could add a commentary there, we've developed a complete scope of work for this project, and others had also developed some scopes of work. It was what level did we want to talk about here today, trying to make some budget decisions as to whether this is a valuable effort to take forward. The concept is take the scope of work that's already been distributed to the data work group, and it's not a final product until we develop get all that input. Today we're trying to talk about very good questions. Is the how are we going to do it? Today I would like to focus on should we do it.
That's why I'm asking these questions, what I need to decide whether to support this or not.
Okay.
And I'm in a very difficult position because I am on the data work group, but the data work group is only met once this year, and I was not part of the discussion. So this proposal came from the data work group, but I've had no opportunity to look at this until right now.
Okay.
I have one more question.
Okay.
You mentioned that you're going to use a panel of 3 agronomists.
That was the proposal.
Mhm.
That can be discussed as to the number of agronomists, who they represent. It's kind of like an appraisal. A lot of the times when you're doing appraisal on commercial buildings, you'll have 2 or 3 appraisers doing that and kind of split the difference of them because it's a judgment call. So the number of 3 seemed like a good number, but that's open to discussion too.
And have any potential applicants for this position
No.
participated in in the planning of this material?
We have not talked about any applicants at this point in time. The statement's just in there, 3 agronomists. Beyond that, we haven't got any more specific than that.
So you don't have anybody in mind?
We don't have anybody in mind at this point.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Go ahead, Steve.
How will the end product be used?
Well, the theory behind the results of the end product is that it would help us focus on where and what BMPs should be applied. If the results of the nitrogen assessment indicated that yes, in fact, a majority of the issues for groundwater problems are related to livestock, it would help us focus the BMPs or whatever recommendations we would have on livestock. If it's irrigated agriculture, it'd help that. If it's equal, it helps us to winnow down, I kind of think of it as a funnel, where we really need to target our efforts. Basically, that is the main technical focus of that, aside from the fact of its educational pluses. But it's a tool to get us to finalization of the proper actions that the GWMA should be recommending in the plan.
Could you just be a little more specific? Let's take a crop. Let's look at, say, hops. So you did a budget on hops. What's that going to tell us and how are we going to use it?
Let me take a shot.
Sure.
Okay. Since I'm
I don't care.
no, because I have a perspective. Okay, first of all, let's say we have the ability that we pretty much know where every hop field is in the county. So first of all, we're starting off with the geographic locations and all that. We can go to the books and say how much nitrogen should you apply to hops to get the best yield. We go to the books and pull out what the uptake is and all that kind of stuff. So we can do this all book stuff. Even if we do it book stuff, it's going to have a geographic component. So we can look at the entire area, but we can also go in and say we want to cut the GWMA in half. And we can look at pieces because everything comes down to a specific place on the ground. Hopefully we are able through the deep soil sampling program be able then to calibrate and say, well, it says that you're supposed to put X number of pounds on per whatever, but this is what we're actually doing. The book says that so much is going to be taken up, and we can calibrate with actually the deep soil sampling. It won't be perfect at that site, but if we get enough information, we can start to calibrate this
So are we working towards a prescription?
prescription. No, I don't.
Fertilizer prescription, is that what we're headed, is that what this is going to do?
What? I'm sorry.
A prescription, so, per.
No, I think what it would say to me is, coupled with the deep soil sampling, is this stuff is working and this stuff is not necessarily working. And it's just information. It doesn't track back to any particular place or source or anything. It gives us a nitrogen loading and budget information.
So to answer your question about are we headed down to a prescriptive, prescriptive actions, at this point that's not being considered. I mean, we would not.
It wasn't for what you said.
Am I pulling it too hard for you, Steve? But it would provide some specificity from a educational standpoint. And again, like I said, I will tell you that at this point, there is no consideration of having prescriptive allotments for fertilizer in any basin in Washington. And I don't see this prompting that.
Charlie, just real quickly, I see this is to quantify the sources of nitrate, where are the problems coming from, and to what extent. This will give us theoretical values after you do all the calculations. Then the field studies that we're doing will collaborate those, or say, well,
So are the sources based on crop then? Is that how you come up with a source?
yes, that could be one of the.
So X crop, the value is X pounds, and B crop is X pounds.
Yeah. Realizing that you don't grow, well, I don't think you grow exactly the same crop that place every year. There's some rotation. And part of the information we're trying to understand out of the survey part of the deep soil sampling is what is that crop rotation kind of factor. And then,
This is, from our perspective, this would be done very similar to the way that we do our whole ESA program related to pesticides. Part of what we do is when we go out and we meet with growers and we do develop a typical application profile for a pesticide. How much, what timing, method of application, etc. And that helps us understand why, if we see an elevated level in a surface or groundwater body, it helps us understand why that may have happened. Now, how we use that data is that we'll go back then and meet with the group, or a group of growers or a certain commodity, explain to them what we've found, and then ask for their suggestions as to how to modify those practices so we're not seeing it in the surface water and the groundwater. And it's an iterative process. My thought would be, after that is completed, then everybody will understand the mechanisms that are occurring here in the valley and cooperate and work together to make those changes that needed to be made.
So that's going to have to be followed up with additional data such as a DSS though, right?
Yes.
I mean, just because you're putting on X pounds of nitrogen on any crop, doesn't necessarily mean anything.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And we've already gone through and done an analysis based on recommended fertilizer application rates, the value. We have a map that's all multicolored now that you can look up and you can see what the recommended values are. That doesn't tell you anything except what the recommended values are. It doesn't tell you if it's protective of water quality. It doesn't tell you how much nitrogen is removed by the crop, how much of it is modified in the soil column. It doesn't tell you what to expect from a groundwater standpoint.
Okay, so you just see this as a tool to go along with the other tools?
This is a tool, but this is a major tool.
Any other questions we need? We're taking a lot of time on this. Let's move on.